After weeks of lockdown, a few nations are beginning to ease the stay-at-home order. Schools, malls, restaurants, among others, are allowed to return to operations gradually. Everyone is still expected to use the face masks and heed every other sanitary procedure in order to contain the spread of COVID-19. Many are wondering if the world will be the same again, as everyone is considered a potential carrier of the virus, and rigorous testing measures are adopted across the globe. According to our World in Data, tests help identify infected individuals, guide the medical treatment, enable the isolation of those infected, and the tracing and quarantining of their contacts. In addition, testing for COVID-19 also informs understanding of the pandemic and the risk it poses in different populations, and to properly assess the intervention that should be implemented, including very costly interventions such as social distancing and the shutdown of entire regions and industries. WHO's top emergencies expert, Mike Ryan, repeated an earlier WHO warning against easing restrictions too soon.
If the calculation is made and then the restrictions are eased too early, you may be back in a situation where lockdowns have to be reimposed, and that again has an increased impact and potentially an even greater impact on livelihoods.
Second wave, as Mike said, is in our hands. If we implement the right intervention, we can prevent it from happening, and focused on public health interventions, of course.
So these seroepidemiology studies have been very important. Even though they're early, even though there are some limitations with these studies that have come out so far, it's important that we understand at this point in time, 4 months into a global pandemic, a large proportion of the population still remains susceptible.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari announces that the government would ease restriction on May 4th. This may have come due to the deafening cries over hunger, increased crimes and negative impact on businesses. The government insists the lockdown measure, though flouted in some hinter areas, is to enable the country contain the spread of COVID-19.
For the past 4 weeks, most parts of our country have been under either federal government or state government lockdowns. As I mentioned earlier, these steps were necessary and overall have contributed to slowing down the spread of COVID-19 in our country. However, such lockdowns have also come at a very heavy economic cost. Many of our citizens have lost their means of livelihood. Many businesses have shut down. No country can afford the full impact of a sustained lockdown while awaiting the development of vaccines. We assessed how our factories, markets, traders, and transporters can continue to function while at the same time adhering to NCDC guidelines on hygiene and social distancing.
But that is not the case, as Nigerians express their liberty finally out of their homes after 4 weeks in the most unsafe ways, negating some rules applied during the lockdown. A threat to winning the battle against COVID-19.
If government can do what, can put an enforcement, even let the police work on it. If you are passing on the road, if you are not with your face man, they will arrest you. From there, I believe, for the safety of everybody.
I think the number of cases will skyrocket. Since when we are at lockdown, the number keep increasing. Releasing us to come out now is just like sending us on suicide mission.
Mrs. Ayamba Dafinone had returned to Nigeria from London, one of the high-risk countries, and self-isolated, though without any symptoms. 24 hours after her birthday, she falls ill.
The journey with the COVID-19 infection started with my trip to London. And while in London, the talk about COVID and the spread started becoming more and more common. So I actually started thinking maybe there's a possibility, 50% chance I might have had it or I might not have caught it. I'm not sure. So I said rather than taking chances when getting back home, I should err on caution. So I decided when arriving back in Lagos that I would self-isolate, and I did so in a different building. While in self-isolation, I then got ill. I got different symptoms, some chills, headaches, diarrhea, temperature, splitting headaches, as I've said, severe chest pains and lower back pains. In all of this, we liaised with the doctor and we decided to test. After testing, the results hadn't come out. I felt worse and decided it was best I checked into IDH. And we then went into IDH without my results. While at IDH, the treatment, as I said, was good. We were on medication and I stayed there for 8 days. On coming out, I was surprised to find people inquiring what kind of medication, was the place clean, am I sure it's a place people should go to? And I then actually realized that there might be just a chance that there were lots of people who were ill and felt uncomfortable with the Nigerian medical system or whatever. And I just felt there was need to let them know that there was nothing wrong with going to IDH Yaba, and more importantly, that by them not going, they stood a chance to spread the virus, and that was going to put all of us at risk. And that was why my primary reason for becoming more vocal. And I'm actually happy that I did so, because the very next day I got a phone call from one of the friends that met there saying a family of 12 had arrived, and they said they'd seen the interview the night before and decided to come for testing, and 11 of them proved to be positive from one family.
She says she had a tough time battling to survive, as her symptoms included loss of taste and smell, which were not initially captured on the list of symptoms released to the public.
In terms of the symptoms were spread over a week. So you would start with, say, muscular pains, severe muscular pains, and then it would then go on to diarrhea a couple of days, and then maybe fever for 3-4 days. And while this is happening, you're having night sweats, you're having rigors, shivering, and then towards the end was the severe chest pains, as if a knife was being driven through, and lower back pains. But in all of that, it was the weakness that came maybe 5 days after the symptoms, where I could barely move. That's what made me feel there was need. I didn't comply with the CDC rules, which was you had to be coughing and breathless, so they were reluctant to take me for testing. But luckily, again, since the interview, CDC about 4 days ago has now listed those symptoms I mentioned, about 6 more, as part of the guidelines, so that people who are displaying those symptoms will easily get admitted. Before, it wasn't the case.
Her fears ranges from the reopening of public life, even though gradually, to the wild spread of the virus.
In March, the Minister of Information announced that they would aggressively pursue measures to ensure that the spread of the virus is reduced. The word was aggressively pursue measures. Now, what the federal government has done is through Ministry of Agric, they gave out food to various local governments. Subsequently, as to whether those food given out was sufficient or the quality of the food given out by Ministry of Humanitarian Aid, it's suspect, okay, but the intention was there, that they would feed the people. Now, for Lagos State, they have done really, really well, okay? They have pursued an aggressive policy. They have come up with information, okay, informing people that these are the steps they're going to try and take. Now, in terms of impact, there has been a flaw in awareness. There has been a flaw in sensitizing the public. A lot of the public are not aware that of what COVID is. A lot of the public are not aware of how the impact would be. A lot of them are not, because I spoke to a plumber, as I say, and I asked him, do you want the lockdown to continue? He said, no, I'm hungry. I said, okay, look, with COVID, you could get ill. With COVID, you could die. But if we do the lockdown, it might stop the spread, or it will stop the spread, depending on how efficient and effective the lockdown is. What do you now say? He said, who won't die? I don't want to die. I would rather do the lockdown, but what is government going to do? And that's the question you asked. What is government going to do? There are loads of areas where they didn't see the food. There are loads of areas where the distribution of the food has been ineffective. Down the road from where we are, they were selling food. My staff said, madam, 1,200 naira gari, 600 naira gari. Those things that were given out were sold. So it's important that we see how we can help the people. It hasn't been effective. In some countries, okay, they've been effective, they haven't had lockdowns. Okay, some have had minimal lockdowns. In some states in Nigeria, some of them haven't done lockdowns because they've never had any case. Now, when something is strange to you and you've never heard about it and you're not aware of anybody who has had the virus, it's like, what are they talking about? As I say, some of these people don't have television sets. Some of these people are illiterate. Is it their fault, or is it that we never invested in education properly in the first place? Okay, is it their fault that they're living in crowded spaces because we don't have social housing, adequate social housing? Okay, the main thing is that an awareness, enlightenment campaign should have been done aggressively. That wasn't done. Because if you don't have a buy-in or a belief, then you have resistance. Okay, that was the very first thing, and government has failed. Now, what is interesting, very interesting, is our electricity bills get charged. So electricity companies have the database of where all these people are. They know the databases of Okobaba, they know the databases of Yajegunle. They know where everybody, they all get electricity bills. So they have an idea of these households. So if there was going to be a sharing of palliatives, those names already exist. That would have been a perfect data bank to even start with. Agencies have to work together because certain agencies have information, but to say, oh, we don't know where they are. Now, what did they do or not do? Because it's important what hasn't been done. There are no posters in front of local governments. There are no pictorial posters. There's no megaphones on the streets. There are no town criers. I remember the campaign that was run for a current governor in the state here. It was the most amazing campaign. Why haven't they employed such people to run a campaign to let Nigerians know so they have a buy-in and understand what the virus can cause? We're setting ourselves on for a potential explosion. We've reached a stage now where the exponential growth has started and is rising. I don't understand why, when the curve is rising, the government decides it's opening up. Okay? What is going to happen is that it is going to keep on rising faster than it would have risen if the government had done a lockdown. Now, the reason the government wants to ease is because of tension in the country, potential tension. Going back to your first question, have they done enough? They hadn't done enough, because if they had done enough, then the funds and the palliatives and the relief measures would have reached the public.
The head of the World Health Organization warns that the coronavirus pandemic is far from over, raising concerns about the impact of the disruption of normal health services, especially on children.
Although COVID-19 is taking a heavy toll, WHO is deeply concerned about the impact the pandemic will have on other health services, especially for children. Children may be at relatively low risk from severe disease and death from COVID-19, but can be at high risk from other diseases that can be prevented with vaccines. Vaccine Alliance has estimated that at least 21 low and middle income countries are already reporting vaccine shortages as a result of border closures and disruptions to travel. And a new modeling analysis published last week estimates the potential disruption to malaria services from COVID-19 in 41 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. In the worst-case scenario, the number of malaria deaths in sub-Saharan Africa could double. Lockdowns in Europe ease with declining numbers of new cases. We continue to urge countries to find, isolate, test, and treat all cases and trace every contact to ensure these declining trends continue. But the pandemic is far from over. WHO continues to be concerned about the increasing trends in Africa, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and some Asian countries.
There is an agreement by the northern governors to ban Al-Majri system in the whole region. The Al-Majri system is hereby banned in Bauchi State.
Stricter measures come up. The community spread of the virus must be contained, especially in the north, where a group known as Al-Majri clustered together to acquire Islamic education. There have been controversies over the system, which have exposed many young children to street begging. Such activity at this time is not encouraged. Many of them have traveled from one state to the other to settle among like minds, but must now return home.
It is unfortunate that we have to wait for the COVID-19 pandemic in order to take these drastic measures that will go a long way in transforming the society. Because we all know that statistics have shown we have between 9 to 11 million children roaming the streets in northern Nigeria. So this is an action that is long overdue. It is unfortunate in the sense that it is coming only now when these children are likely going to be a potential means of further spread of this pandemic disease. As we all know, studies have shown that a large percentage of these children are below the age of 10, and significant numbers still are below the age of 10 to 15. Only very few of them are about 16. So if you look at it, these are age categories that are highly dependent. They cannot cater for themselves, so they cannot take decisions on their own in order to protect themselves. As a matter of fact, what we are hearing right now, quite a number of them don't even know about the existence of the virus. So they are highly at risk and they are highly vulnerable. We welcome them back anyway into the society because they are our future leaders. We want to see them turn into useful members of the society, but we shouldn't overlook anything that will likely lead to a further spread, because these are children that are going to be reintegrated back into the locality. They are going down to the grassroots, to the rural areas, where even communication will be very difficult with their parents once a child is noticed to have a symptom. So keeping them in the camp now is a good idea, but keeping them for 2 weeks will be an excellent idea.
Eyamba is more concerned about government ensuring that more facilities are ready to accommodate cases, especially now that the lockdown has been eased.
We must have a yardstick on determining if the person has a very strong likelihood of having COVID. Okay, you have the data bank of symptoms, which are coughing, breathlessness, fatigue, lack of taste, lack of smell, rigors, headaches, sharp pain in the chest. Going to the CDC site, you'll see the list of symptoms. Now, if any of those symptoms, that is where the enlightenment campaign goes, where you let the public know this is what you're watching out for. So if your sister, your brother, so if we all look after each other as neighbors, you see them, oh, my chest, or they're breathless, or they're sweating, or they have diarrhea, you say, please go and have a test. Now, if government knows and is honest with the public and say, because even the international countries are looking for testing equipments, okay? If they say, look, we have a problem sourcing the testing equipments. However, with these symptoms, this is a number you can call and say, I have this, this, and this, and this. I think I have it. Then you go in and go into the suspicious thing, and they start looking after you. Now, if those tents are full because we're now unlocking and there might be a rapid growth of more cases, then they should please get schools ready and talk to the various think tank groups you're discussing, COVID, different organizations, and say, are we doing mattresses as standby? Are we planning ahead? Are we doing oxygen as standby? Are we building toilets as standby? You then plan what is available in the Nigerian limitations, given that we have not invested in the health sector. Is it that you're now going to tell those private hospitals, come for training, let's certify you so that you're prepared and you have your hazmat suits and you have your PPE equipments and your staff knows what to do? Is it that you're going to tell people these are the numbers you call just for normal ailments, and these hospitals, which are the list of hospitals that have been accredited, let the public know the accredited hospitals they can go to for COVID-like symptoms and where they'll be able to get medication within their locality, so that they're not spreading. It should be within their locality. These are the things we should be doing. I'm sure government is intending to, but there is need to act quickly, but not hurriedly. You act quickly, but not hurriedly. You have to plan and put things in place before you take steps. I'm sure Lagos State is not really happy with the announcement that we should unlock so quickly and all that, but they have tried their best in giving guidelines to organizations. Okay, please do this, fumigate, X number of staff come in, bus fees, please don't take so many people. But they know it's not the time. It's not when you have the numbers rising that you open up. But the things that should have happened, okay, to prevent that, ensuring that the masses that were in the lower brackets of income earners were looked after effectively, didn't happen.
Eyamba is very conscious of her space. She tries to be meters away from other persons. Her message is clear.
What the illness did to me, psychologically, how I felt, I don't wish it on my worst enemy. And as such, there's no guarantee I won't get it again. So I'd rather protect myself, and I want people, I'm not encouraging any visitors. I don't know what they're going to give me. I don't know where I got it from in the first place, and I would rather people just stay far, maintain 3 meters away from me, have your mask on and your gloves on, and my staff know they have to be miles away from me when they're talking to me. And I actually adopted that policy before I got into IDH, and that's why none of them were sick. Because when I was in isolation, there was somebody there, but they had to be masked and gloved. And I told them, I keep on telling them, when they were masked and gloved, it protected them. So please stay, keep the distance, keep the rules. You might get protected. When I was ill, it was painful. Some people don't have all those symptoms, but you don't want it to happen to anybody. I don't want to repeat it. It's best, I play safe. Please, COVID is real. It's important we all are careful.